Now, it was about this time I entered politics. Well, I had already been a day laborer, farmhand, carpenter, store clerk, rail splitter, ferryman, and postmaster. I continued my learning in New Salem with our local schoolmaster, and I studied law there as well. After one defeat running for state legislator, humble Abraham Lincoln won election to that post in 1834 and again in 36. It was then that I moved to our new state capital of Springfield, where I'd be in a law practice with my friend John Todd Stewart. I rode into that town on a borrowed horse and all of my possessions in 2 saddlebags.
When I completed finishing school, where along with the social graces I learned to speak and write fluent French, I went to pay a visit to my older sister, Mrs. Ninian Edwards, who was living in Springfield, Illinois. Now, at that time, it was almost a custom to bring unmarried young relatives to the new state capital for visits to swell the ranks of the eligible young ladies, and I quickly became one of the most sought-after eligibles. And the gathering of young people at the Edwards home, the coterie, included the elite of Springfield, where I was the center of attraction. One member wrote to a relative, "Mary is the very creature of excitement, and never enjoys herself more than when in society and surrounded by the company of merry friends." I also loved dances, and at one of these a tall gentleman approached me.
Miss Todd, I'd like to dance with you in the worst way.
And he certainly did. In the worst way. And that's how Mr. Lincoln and I met. Although we came from such different backgrounds, we shared much in common. We each loved poetry, Shakespeare, and Kentucky. And I believe Mr. Lincoln was surprised that we shared something else in common, political beliefs. Although in those days it was unusual for women to be interested in politics, I had been since I was a little girl, when I had been an acquaintance of none other than Mr. Henry Clay himself. I was a Whig, and so was Mr. Lincoln.
And I was totally fascinated by this young woman. And oftentimes I just listened to her and gazed into her beautiful eyes as she spoke. Now eventually, by the end of 1840, Molly, well, that's what her closest friends called her, and I became engaged.
Now, Mr. Lincoln was certainly not the most handsome of men, as friends would point out.
As a matter of fact, later on in life, in a debate against Stephen A. Douglas, who, by the way, had been one of Mary's beaux, he called me two-faced. And I replied, "Well, now, if I was, do you think that I'd walk around wearing this one?"
As I was saying, I wrote to a friend, I would rather marry a good man, a man with mind, with a hope and bright prospects ahead for position, fame, and power, than all the houses and gold in the world.
Now, I do want you to know that Molly was the first and the only woman that I truly loved. However, her family was not too happy with the situation.
My sister told me we were not suited for each other, different in nature and education, so different that we could not live happily as man and wife.
And then came that fatal 1st of January, 1841, when Molly and I ended our engagement. The reasons are forgotten, but not the results. As I wrote to my friend John Todd Stewart, "I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would not be one cheerful face on this earth."
We were separated for almost a year, but through the help of a mutual friend, we began to secretly meet again in 1842. And finally, on the evening of November 4th, in the home of my sister, Mrs. Ninian Edwards, Mr. Lincoln and I were married. As the minister, Dr. Dresser, asked us to stand by one another, for richer, for poorer, for better, or for worse, Mr. Lincoln placed on my finger my wedding ring with the engraved inscription, "Love is eternal."